You grab what's quick and easy, a ready meal, a snack bar, or whatever's in the cupboard or fridge, and tell yourself it's just a busy day, it's okay. But when that becomes the everyday, the quick fix can start to chip away at more than just your waistline. What if the food you lean on now is quietly influencing not only your energy, but your hormones, your mood, and how you experience midlife and menopause? This is Women's Health Unwrapped. I'm Nicola Fondell, and in today's episode we're talking about something most of us don't give nearly enough credit to: the big impact of what you eat on how you feel, especially during perimenopause and beyond. I'm joined by Susan Mandala, a woman who swapped out ultra-processed foods, UPFs, which you might have been hearing about a lot in the media lately, for whole, nourishing meals, and watched ripple effects across her sleep, her mental clarity, her hormones, her energy when she was moving, and her overall sense of well-being. If you've ever felt like food is a battleground or believed weight was the only measure of health, this conversation may shift everything. Hi, Susan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Nicola. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here with you today.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So before we get into our conversation, I like to find out a little bit about the guest and what they do to support their health and well-being. So I'd love to know from you what you would say your most impactful healthy habit is in your toolkit at the moment.
I would say that if you were going to force me to choose just one, the top one would be is that I do not eat ultra processed food. All the food I eat is food that I suppose it would be our great grandparents now would recognize. So when I go to the shops, I don't get anything in boxes, nothing with more than one or two ingredients, as long as the second ingredient is salt. So, so I might have like cured meat, as long as it's meat and salt, and that's it. So no ultra processed food, and cut way, 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 way down on sugar and complex sugars. So all the carbs, just way down.
So your nutrition is the one habit for you that is really making a big impact to how you feel.
Eat real food and know what real food is.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely want to get into that. And I know that's a part of your story as to how you've built your health and feel really strong and well now. And of course, ultra processed foods, UPFs, are a very hot topic in the wellbeing space at the moment for lots of reasons. So yeah, I'm excited to find out more about that, and I'm sure we can share lots of tips to help other people navigate this, because yeah, it's a big struggle for a lot of people, and it's a very, very, very normal part of our food landscape here in the UK, isn't it?
Yeah. So I would say so. But go ahead, Nicholas. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Let's get into your story then, Susan. So take me back to, I've given away, kind of what we're sharing here, your health and how strong you feel right now. But take me back to when that wasn't the case. Like, what started to change for you that meant your health had, started to decline?
Yeah, well, I got to be in my mid 40s, thereabouts. And I don't think that's when it started. I think that's when it accumulated enough for me to notice, or for me to not be able to ignore. Right. So I think it probably started in my mid 30s and gradually. But by my mid 40s, I had always been active. I'd always been athletic. I'd always had energy. I'd always, had a certain kind of resilience, and when I looked at myself in the mirror, I looked a certain way. My eyes had a certain shape, etc. But I got to be in my mid 40s and I just didn't feel good. And I was tired, and I would sort of go off to exercise and be like, oh God, I don't have this energy. And then I thought, oh, maybe it's just, working too hard. And then I was like, yes, but you've always worked like this. Your working pattern hasn't changed. And then I would look in the mirror and my face just looked wrong. And my eyes looked wrong, which might sound funny, but I think it's to do with a certain puffiness in your face. If you're not healthy. And so my eyes just didn't look like the right shape. They looked smaller and the shine had gone off them. And when I smiled, it didn't look like my smile. There was sort of like my smile was diminished because the glow was not there in my eyes, to really be behind that smile. My skin was just, you would break out, I'd still get pimples and I'm like, I'm 47. Why am I getting pimples? This is ridiculous. And then I'd have like rashes and then, on my thumbs, my skin would just split open near the nail, and so every time you put your hands in your purse, you get this stab of pain and that would just come and go. And I was just like, oh, it's that thing again, and then gradually, and also there was I don't mean to sound indecorous for your viewers, but there was just horrible bloating around the middle, and my arms and legs would be kind of like their reasonable normal size, and I would just have this huge enormous stomach, and I thought that is not right. That just is not right, and my jawline didn't look right, and my hair was just. I was afraid in my 40s that I would lose all my hair. And I used to really be afraid of that. I think that's very, very hard, especially for a woman. And it terrified me, and every day yet, after a shower, a bath, just see hair, and it got to the point where I was, leaving, where I used to work at the time one day, long, long day, and, my vision was blurry and I rubbed my eyes and my vision was still blurry. I closed my eyes, blinked them, vision was still blurry, rubbed them again, my vision was still blurry. And I was at that point, I said to myself, okay, this is, no, this, whatever this is, it is not good. And, and it just carried on, went home. And it wasn't blurry to the extent that I couldn't see, but it was just, I was like, everything was smudged. And it was about an hour before that cleared up. And I thought, right, I'm not going to live my life like this. And I didn't like the message that you got into your mid 40s and you began the great decline. I just thought, well, why, no, why would that be? I didn't really think about it in any articulate sense, the way I think about it now. But I just thought, I thought, no, there's something intuitively that doesn't make sense to me, that we should just accept long decline.
Did you feel like everything meant there might be an illness or disease, that there might be something medically wrong? Or did you, just associate it with aging, but then feel that bit of rebellion to know this doesn't have to be aging and how I age at this time of my life?
Well, I will say, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist. This is only my own experience. But at that point, I just thought, okay, there's something not right. Is it a disease? Is it not a disease? I thought my instinct was, okay, there's some low hanging fruit, and let's just see what happens there. And so I thought, right. And I think it got to be, I think it was Boxing Day 2019. And I said, right, that's it. First of all, you know what real food is. And you also know you're not eating real food.
What was your diet like actually at that time?
My diet that time was an attempt at healthy meals. So I would have a healthy breakfast, and that would be yogurt and fruit and nuts. And I'd be like, okay, I've had my healthy breakfast, but then I would go about my day, and it just, get really tired again and be like, oh, well, I've done really good work this morning, so I'll have a brownie, and then, and then, oh, and I'll go and I'll have a nice coffee. And then the coffee is one of these very sugary sort of treat like coffees that's, where they put loads of stuff in it. And then, it gets to be 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And, I was working in an office at the time, or in an office environment. And it's just sort of like, oh, we've brought donuts, or, oh, we have little tidbits, or, oh, there's a celebrations box, so it's like you can never get away from it. And then not only that are people bringing stuff in, but suddenly I look around, and every workspace I ever entered, there's a coffee and sweet thing cart every 10 feet. It used to, when I began my career, you would go in to wherever it is you were working, and they'd have a canteen or a snack bar or whatever, and that, you had to at least walk from your desk to the where the canteen was, you know. But now it's just sort of like there's the canteen, and then if you can't make it to the canteen, there's a little cart, and then there's like a pop-up cabin in every building, and then and just so there was that trend as well, our food environment. We can come back to that topic if you want to. But at the time, I just thought, right, before I wade in to, go into the GP and all of that, I thought, right, start eating real food, cut way, way back. You don't need to have a sweet, sugary, processed, snack every time you finish a task, And then the underlying question was, what is it about your work-life balance or how you feel that means every time you finish a task, you sort of think, oh, wow, God, I'd, need to reward myself, need to, pick myself up from doing that task. I thought, when did life get like that? So I thought that was an interesting thought process. And so, and at about the same time, mid to late 40s, the perimenopause had started. And I'm like, oh, yay. So that, now on top of all of this, and for me, it was just the sweating. And so I thought, well, okay, here we go. But, I didn't connect the two things. I thought there's something going on. I'm not the healthy, active person I was. And I refuse to accept that it's just because I'm 40 something. And now I'm beginning the perimenopause, so, and that's over there. And so I thought, right. So the first thing I did was no junk food. I'm just cutting out junk food. And if I want something sweet, I'm going to have to go and buy basic ingredients and make it myself. And that was, Michael Pollan says this in one of his books. I think it was his book about food, that there's a real difference between just being able to go every 10 feet and purchase this affordable, delicious sugar hit, right? Which takes you no effort. You don't even have to wash the dishes after, and going to the shop, buying the real food, planning what the thing is going to be, buying what you need for it, getting all the raw ingredients, getting it back to your kitchen, making it, and then, washing up after it and all the rest of that. So, you're less likely to do that. That's, a lot of effort. So you're not going to do that every day. You're certainly not going to do it after every hard task. So I stopped eating. That was the first step. No junk food. Just none. And it was a bit strange for a couple of days. And
just a couple of days? Was it that fast that you managed to make the switch?
I think making the switch came in stages. But that first few days when I was just, that there was like a radical shift, no junk food, and really sat down and said, and none of this fooling yourself. It's like, well, that's not so bad. So I'll just, like a granola bar is okay. No, that's junk food, and really reading packets and sort of saying, what is in this? And discovering, no, that's not real food. Nope, that's not real food. That's not real food. And so the first couple of days, there was just kind of like gaps in my schedule. But, and that was the thing. It's like, well, this was the time when I would normally have had a brownie break or a cookie break or a biscuit break or whatever it was, and then I'm like, well, now what do I do? So I thought, well, okay, I need to fill this time, and so, but what happened as I shifted at the same time, I said, well, okay, I'm not going to eat junk food. I'm only going to eat real food. And the real food was very satisfying. So I wasn't hungry, and I didn't have this drive to go and eat more, because the real food just filled me up, satisfied me. I felt good. I didn't get headaches. Oh, that was another thing. I used to think, oh, I'm a person who gets migraines. I would have once a month a really awful headache. And in between then, I would have like other headaches, right? And so they say, oh, yes, a symptom of X whatever is a headache. And I'm like, well, that's not very useful, because I can have a headache on any given day.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh, this is modern life. It gives us headaches, and looking back, I think, well, no. And so when I got the junk food out, it was suddenly like a veil had lifted, and I could see things much more clearly. And then I thought, okay, and I would snack on fruit or nuts. I'm like, it just has to be a one ingredient whole food, and then I started, there are recipes and books around that will sort of support if you want to eat that way. And so I started um, changing the way that I cooked. And so one of the things I used to like was a kind of like a kind of basil sauce, but it wasn't basil; it was pistachio.
Ooh,
Right?
like a pesto,
Like a pesto,
homemade. Yeah.
yeah, like a pistachio pesto. And I'm like, oh, this is 3 ingredients. This is, the pistachios. I think it was Parmesan cheese and a little olive oil. But I think just judging on memory. And so, and I started doing things like that. And so, and I started to really enjoy my food, and and it was just a lovely feeling around the food. And I had discovered that when I was just eating loads of sugary, manky snacks, there was a manicness about that. And that this kind of eating was very calming. And I remember I had been doing it, I suppose, a week or two, something like that. And had really I was like, wow, I don't even want these sugary snacks anymore. Just eating real food. And I'd sat down one night and I had made myself some lamb mince, just with a little homemade sauce. At that time, I was still eating sauces. I don't really do that anymore. But it was just a basic tomato thing with some lamb mince, just a nice little bowl of food. And I ate that. And I thought, this feeling of peacefulness came over me, which I thought, and I noticed it because I thought, how long have I gone in my life without feeling this peacefulness? Which it was such a natural state. It was like a return to something. And I thought, wow, I've not felt this since I cannot remember the last time I felt like this. And I thought, when did this sort of manic sort of agitated energy, I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to get there and I haven't done this, and where's my list, I have to put more things on my list, when did that become what I thought was just the condition of our lives, when suddenly I had this feeling where I was like, oh, I feel nourished, I feel calm, I feel peaceful, I feel safe, and I watched, I think, one episode of something I wanted to watch on television, and then I read my book, and then I just fell into a natural sleep and had a wonderful night's sleep. And nothing in my life had changed. There was the to-do list was still there. The tricky things on the to-do list were still on the to-do list. The issues that had to be dealt with were still issues that had to be dealt with. The annoying people in life that, persist. I don't know, maybe that's a different podcast. But, they were still there. Everything was still there. But I was like, okay, well, those are those things, and I'll deal with them one at a time, and in the meantime, there was just this peacefulness. And once that happened, once the benefits really started to accrue, then the want, for those sugary snacks just gradually disappeared. And then all kinds of things just got better. And so I just continued on that and just continued on that journey. And that was something that I just found enormously helpful and enormously empowering. But I've been talking and talking, so
Yeah, I've got lots of different. I'm thinking, which path do I go down? Because there's so much you've shared there. I liked what you said actually about feeling manic around food and choices and behavior. I think that's really interesting and actually very common. And as you've described, feeling and believing and telling yourself maybe even that is just how life is, that this is the way we eat. And it's funny, my husband and I were talking about this something related to this the other day, around how many families don't eat together, how many families create different meals for every member of the family. And I think there's just this whole attitude and behavior system around food for many people that they just think, well, this is how it is, this is the way we shop, this is the way we cook, this is the way we eat, this is when we eat. And I think it's just so fascinating that you very quickly felt that shift, and it sounds like there was a lot of self-awareness. Having met you, I can tell you are a self-aware person. You're an academic, who you are as a person, which actually, and this is no judgment on other people, it's just how we're wired. Most of us don't have that self-awareness, but I think that's something that with all coaching brings. It's not just me as a particular type of coach, but coaching is about helping people to be self-aware regardless of what it is they're having coaching for, because we need that self-awareness to then be able to change our behaviors, our actions, and so on. So it feels like that self-awareness, which started to arise very quickly because of the different food choices you were making, gave you that information, if you like. It was like the intelligence of the insight of, oh, actually that's changed now, this is making me feel like this, and this means that I'm feeling different, and so that could be the process. Was that how it all started to become your lifestyle now?
Yeah, I felt I had a very interesting experience, and I don't want to trespass on anyone else's beliefs. But for me, I felt that I could feel my soul again. And for many years, for I think probably 2 decades, for the previous 20 years, I'd felt far away from myself. I just thought, or not in touch with myself, and disconnected. I mean, I was in the world, I said hello to people, I did my thing, I participated at meetings. Some people thought a little bit too much, but never mind. I just did, I did all of that, but I just felt like there was just this sort of like separation, and really the separation was me feeling separate from myself. And then when I sort of, and I think that the biggest thing, I didn't say this before, but I stopped eating wheat bread, anything with wheat. And I felt so much better. I felt calmer. I felt like I could think things through. Like I'd always been a person who was like, oh my God, this happened. I have to do something. I'm going to do this, and that's not always the best thing, and then 3 days later, I'd be like, oh, actually, I could have done that other thing, but it's too late. I'd already, so I got to, so I stopped eating all the grains. I thought, right, no wheat. And I thought, while I'm at it, no rice, no polenta, no corn, and the bloating went away. That was interesting. And also stopped eating potatoes and all the starches like that, the starchy veg like that. Just stopped eating those. The bloating went away. The puffiness went away. The shine came back into my eyes, and my hair got much, much healthier. And I stopped worrying about my hair, and that peacefulness inside me. And I felt, oh, I could really, feel a joyfulness, a peace in my heart that I hadn't really felt in a long time. And I thought, wow, how I lived a long time with that missing. And then I felt much more connected. And I used to wake up. I used to just sleep horribly, and I would wake up really early and be annoyed that I was awake and I couldn't get back to sleep. And I read it in a book somewhere, oh, just embrace your mornings, and, put on a soft light or light a candle and listen to some music and enjoy your coffee. So I thought, right, well, I'll try it. And I did it. And I thought, this is nice. And it was during those mornings, because I think it was our summer. And so it's never really dark. And so even if it was 4 o'clock in the morning, the sun was already up, the blackbirds were singing, and it was lovely and quiet and still and just beautiful. And I just sort of felt really connected, with the life in my garden, and, with how beautiful the sky was, and with the birds singing, and, and I just sort of feeling, just a sense of belongingness, with the web of life. And I thought, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So and that really, and I still do that to this day. I have very early mornings. So that's just become a habit in my life. And it all started with this sort of not being able to sleep, and, being annoyed and angry, and, and then, and sort of like trying something like almost out of spite to like prove them wrong, to be able to say, yeah, I tried your thing. But no, it worked.
Yeah. It's all so powerful, and it's why I do what I do, because I know that when you take control of your health, those ripple effects are incredible. And that's what you're describing. Is a lot of women focus on their weight, and that's a whole, not just one podcast, but many podcasts, and I've talked about this in lots of different ways. We measure our worth by the way that we look and the number on the scales, and we think health is just an output of the amount we weigh. And of course weight matters in our overall health, but for a lot of women, weight isn't something that is detrimental to their health, the weight they're at, but they still focus on that and think, if I can just lose weight, I'll feel healthier. But as you're describing, like, what we eat is about so much more than that number on the scales. And I was thinking, as you were talking of that program, you might remember, I'm going to say maybe 25 years or so ago, I'm sure she was called Gillian McKeith on Channel 4, You Are What You Eat. I had a book as well, I remember. Back then it was focused on weight, but it was also about the fact that you are what you eat. What you eat determines how you feel, how you then go about your life, as well as your longer term health, how long you live for, how long you live with strong health for. And of course, it's not just about food, it's about movement and stress and sleep, rest, recovery. relationships, all of those are the elements that make up our well-being puzzle, if you like. But yeah, food is such a huge part of all of that. And as you mentioned kind of towards the start of the conversation, the world we live in is a very noisy world when it comes to food. Food is a huge part of our culture where we live. And I think in a lot of, developed countries, food is how we socialize. It's how we reward ourselves, comfort ourselves, manage stress. Yeah, it just plays such a multitude of roles, a lot of which aren't what we need as humans, but we've made food be that piece of what we need, or how we support ourselves. And so yeah, food is just all consuming in every way, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned weight, because I wasn't principally worried about my weight.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't
It
like
was
the
the
bloating.
bloating.
It was
Mm-hmm.
the bloating and the strange puffiness, And I thought, I don't think this is weight, And when I sort of got all the bad stuff out of my diet and then found, okay, what nourishes me? Whole real food, and which whole real foods are best for me. And really sort of fell into that eating pattern, stopped snacking, just ate real food. And the bloating went away. And also in the other part of my life, when I'm not being a writing consultant and a language awareness person, when I'm not doing that, I swim. And I had been, just kind of, I was okay. I was better than some people, worse than others, but I wasn't really getting any better. And, it was just, and I'd be like, I'm not getting any faster. Why am I not getting any faster? And when I changed my diet and sleep got better and my relationship to all kinds of other things in my life got more peaceful, and my swimming suddenly just got, you know, orders of magnitude better. It was just extraordinary. And I was like, wow,
Wow.
and I, I like joined different clubs, and one of the things that's interesting. So I didn't really worry about weight, but I was like, okay, I look like I should look now. And also I had much better muscle tone. And I don't go to the gym and lift weights. I swim. I do a lot of walking because I just choose not to drive. And I thought, wow. So like I would do something new in swimming, and the muscle I needed would appear, and it would appear in proportion. I was like, oh, so this happens naturally. So it's like, so my body said, oh, we're doing this now. Right. Okay. So we need this muscle here. And in order for that muscle to work, we also have to make sure this one is working. And so I was just like, wow, I didn't, and I don't even have scales at home, because one of the things I thought was like, oh, I don't, sometimes the number becomes the goal
Yeah.
when the number is actually just a tool, but I didn't want to be tyrannized by
Mm-hmm.
the scale, so I thought, do my clothes fit? Am I happy in my skin? Does my skin look good? And it was, and the way I started to carry myself changed. I would just stride down the street, whereas I think before I'd been more hunched and sort of, and I would just, and so the swimming just really, so, remarkably, remarkably better. And one of the things I noticed was that I hadn't really progressed in swimming. If you want to swim at a really decent level, the water has to be your ally. And that means you have to listen to it, which I think is going to sound strange, but stay with me on this. A lot of people, when they swim, are either fighting the water, these bah, bah, manic strokes, or they're ignoring the water. They're just swimming and not really paying attention to the water. But when you swim, you cannot see yourself. You can't really see your whole body swimming. So if you want to think, am I doing this stroke right? You need to pay attention to how the water is moving against you when you swim, right? And I just remember this day, and I think this was probably a year or so after I'd been eating and living this new lifestyle. I suddenly became aware of that. I was like, oh, I'm trying this new thing with my stroke, and the water does feel differently, the way that it's moving against me. And and so I started paying attention to that, and that's very consistent information. And I sometimes, joke with people. I'm like, well, I could feel it in the waves, which sounds woo woo, but it really is it's the physics of the way that your body moves through the water, and it will either move one way or the other way, depending on what you do, how you are moving through the water. And that was, because, water is heavy. Water's, you have to, and you don't pick it up and carry it around, but you have to move yourself through it. And it does make a difference. And it opened up a whole new chapter in my life, being able to swim at that different level.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And I think it's all energy, isn't it? Everything you're talking about is this change in your energy, the self-awareness that took a whole new level of, feeling what had shifted in you and what that was meaning to the swimming, or to you, how you're carrying yourself as you move around and with other people. So it's all of those things, and that's what I really want to kind of plant the seed for the person listening to think about is, if you are someone who's focusing on the number on the scales, or the size of your clothes, or the way you look in the mirror, look beyond all of that. As you've described, Susan, you were really very aware. And again, I don't think many of us take time to connect with ourselves as deeply as you did, with how your eyes look, how your skin looks, how your hair looks, how you feel as you're moving through life in every sense. And what do you want to change in that? And what role, as we're talking about here specifically around food, like what role is your diet playing in that right now? Is it where it needs to be? And something I just wanted to highlight is what you talked about with the snacking element, and how quickly you realised, because of what you'd changed in your overall diet, that need for snacks wasn't as strong as it had been. And that's something I experienced myself. I started to really change my diet and also the relationship I had with food in 2017. And I'd always, for most of my adult life since age 19, gone to different weight loss clubs. And I had this mentality of obviously restriction and very intense tracking and measuring and things like that. And I was, like a lot of people who join those clubs, breakfast, mid-morning snack, lunch, mid-afternoon snack, dinner or tea, and then another snack afterwards. And it was just how I felt. And I do think part of it was habit, but part of it was that I was very hungry for those snacks. But once I started to change how I ate, I just didn't need to snack. And it's very rare that I snack these days. Like it's just not habitual for me. And so, yeah, you can make sure that because of the food you're eating, getting enough protein and fiber and healthy fats in maybe those 3 meals you have across a normal day, just don't leave you unsatisfied or hungry and low energy. And that's a really powerful shift as well, because snacking is a whole challenge in itself for lots of people. I've worked specifically with someone who was a very heavy snacker, always sugary snacks, and could recognize that there was a massive dependency on sweet snacks throughout every single day that was playing havoc with our hormones and our overall health. So yeah, that it's really interesting that you called that out. I just before we start to wrap up, Susan, I just wanted to touch on the menopause bit, because you mentioned the perimenopause, and this was something I loved when we first met. how you described it is, it doesn't have to mean we lose control or we see it as that decline. So, how has the rest of your menopause journey been since you started these diet changes?
This was amazing to me because I didn't connect the two things at first. But when I changed my diet and when it had taken hold and was consistent, along with all the other phenomenal health changes, the menopause still happened, but the symptoms disappeared entirely and never came back.
Oh,
So I have had a symptom-free menopause. I just slipped through the menopause without even noticing.
and are you post-menopause now, Susan? Have you had that break since your last period?
Yeah, it's been over 5 years. So, and it just, and all around me, and again, it's like the culture of snacking, right? And all around me, there are clubs forming and, support everybody. And we're having this club where we discuss our feelings about the menopause and what's happening to us and everything else like this. And I remember someone saying, Susan, would you like to join us? And I'm like, well, that's very kind. And I wish you all, a wonderful time. But and it was really, I thought, should I say this out loud? I said, but, I'm going through the menopause, but I'm not having any symptoms. Just, and it was like, they're like, oh.
Maybe you should have gone so that you could share all of this with them and inspire
Maybe.
and empower them. Yeah.
But it was just like this interesting space. I'm like, I'm not having this experience really that other women have. And whenever you hear, uh, sort of like information about the menopause, they always say, well, there's 2% of women who don't have symptoms, as if they just get lucky and that just happens to them and we could never aspire to be them. There's a whole story we get told around the menopause, really since we're teenagers. And it never occurred to me that story could be any different. And then I thought, but I've had this experience and, and of course there's no other me that kept on eating those bad things and what happened to that person's period. We don't really have that. But in my life I just thought, wow, they stopped sharpish, right? That's it. Never had another headache. And never had a cold sweat, never had the hot sweats, never any of the other moodiness, none of that. The energy swings, brain fog, it just stopped. And I thought, I thought, wow, I wasn't expecting that to happen, but that actually really did happen. That, and it's slipping through, and I still feel, in fact, I feel like I have more energy now than when I did. I feel stronger. I feel healthier. I feel more robust. I don't get as many colds. It just is, I sleep the amount I need to sleep at night, and I get up in the morning and I just get up. I don't feel any pain in the morning. I get straight up out of bed. I can still sit on the floor and then get up off the floor without any, it just, so like a range of motion, which is very healthy. And it just astounded me that all of those symptoms, this, all our lives, they warn us about this. And then I was just like, that's not really happening to me. And it was interesting. There was no category for, oh, if you're a person who doesn't eat ultra processed food and you find out that you don't have menopause symptoms, there was no category for that. There was no,
Well, so on that, I'm going to say there has been some research just this year, a very, very big study led by Zoe Science and Nutrition and a team of scientists. It's been published in, I think it's, is it Nature Health and maybe The Lancet? And it's the first study of that scale, which does really show the positive shift of improving your diet on menopause symptoms. And this is exactly why I do what I do, because when you take control of your health and when you improve your health, then you can navigate menopause. It doesn't mean everyone will have no symptoms if they're healthier, but you can, I think a big piece of it is deal with everything with more resilience and strength and self-compassion and all of those amazing things that support you. And the big piece is menopause isn't just about the symptoms at the time it's happening, but about our longer term health and what it does not having those hormones to how our body works. And the healthier we are, the more we can protect our longer term health as well. So yeah, this is proof here with Susan, you know, a living example of where you can really shift that experience of menopause by taking care of yourself. And of course, as I approach it, it's a combination of nutrition, movement, sleep, stress, which you have touched on all of four of those, and mindset, the other piece, which is very, very important. And as you said, you know, really even that example of a morning, working on the attitude of, oh, here I am awake again, you know, why am I awake so early? I want to go back to sleep, to, okay, let's try taking control of the morning and how I think and feel, and seeing where that shifts me for the rest of the day. And that's an example of mindset. So yeah, it's really you know, it's starting to come about. There is some evidence around the impact of exercise and movement on menopause symptoms. So yeah, this is what it's all about, ladies. We've got to take care of ourselves. And I think the biggest message aside to that from your story, Susan, is that food and what you eat impacts so much more than the way you look. Like you said, you know, in the way you look from a size perspective, it's everything in relation to how much energy you have. You've touched on your immune strength, the difference you're seeing in that. You know, there's so much that it's going to ripple out and positively change. So from your experience, and I think you are a unique case study, should we say, because you've changed independently and quite easily. And I know there's lots of people who struggle with that, hence why people sometimes come along and pay to work with me to get that support. But what tips would you give? Like, I like to give 3 simple steps somebody could take. And so here, if we're talking about improving your diet so that it's, you know, more whole food based, less ultra processed, what tips would you get someone started off with?
I would say, first of all, know what real food is.
Yeah,
And
build that
so
knowledge.
build that knowledge, and and we think, oh yes, we know what food is. But as we touched on before, our food environment is often works against us and can be very unhealthy. And so know what real food is. And 2 ways of doing that, read food labels.
Mm-hmm.
That was extraordinary to me, you know, and not the food label on the front of the food where they put all the good stuff, you know, turn it over and read what's actually in it. Right.
Yeah.
And then sort of think, oh, okay, how many of these ingredients can I pronounce? How many of them do I even know what they are? And then, you know, depending on how much time you have, you know, go and look what those ingredients are. What are they? You know, because sometimes the stuff in our food is more about making the food shelf stable than it is about providing nutrition.
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting journey. What is actually in this food? You know, whereas if you know you pick up something in a wrapper, you know, and there's like, you know, 15 ingredients, and you might recognize 3
Mm-hmm.
of them, and you know, those 3 things that you can recognize are like 3 different types of sugar. You know, so, and then you sort of like go and, you know, pick up, I don't know, you know, you sort of like pick up a pork chop and it's like meat, you know, that just, or you pick up eggs and it's like eggs, you know, so that is, you know, or you pick up, you know, I don't know, a thing of blueberries and it's just like blueberries. And, that's it. That's the ingredient. So that's one tip. Second tip is start reading. There's, I think 3 books from me that made a huge difference. We'll see if they're...
I've got one here. See if this is
Yes, I
one.
was going to say that
Yeah.
one. Chris Van Tulleken's work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another book by Nina Teicholz. I don't know if you've come across Nina Teicholz.
Oh, I don't think
but
so.
She wrote a book called The Big Fat Surprise. And that was all about what healthy fats actually are, and about the processed food industry in relation to fat, and about some of the nutritional messaging that started in the United States and has since, that the world kind of took that up. But, what that, where that messaging really comes from. She's an investigative journalist, and her book is really very interesting, very, very powerfully researched, very powerfully evidenced. And now she does all kinds of work on trying to change the nutritional guidelines. So Nina Teicholz, her book, and Gary Taubes, Taubes, wrote a very equally enlightening book about sugar. And Rob Lustig has also written powerfully about sugar.
Yeah.
And all of these people, they've given lectures on YouTube, and they've given accounts of their books, and you can read their books. And of course, Chris Van Tulleken's work. So read food labels, educate yourself. There's a world of information out there, about what real food is. And then we've touched on all of these pillars of good health. So there's diet, there's sleep, there's exercise, there's mindset, there's movement. And I think it was, I forget who it was. It might've been Rangan Chatterjee, who also does a wellness podcast. Wherever you start in one of those pillars, it will have a positive knock-on effect on all the others. So I started with food, and that had a positive knock-on effect on energy, which helped my sleep, which helped my exercise, which helped my feeling of connection. And then all of those things, there was a positive feedback loop because they all got stronger. But maybe for somebody else, the way in is exercise. Or maybe for somebody else, the way in is mindset, and then everything else, but whichever one of those pillars. And then, pay attention to what another thing that happened. I think this might be a 4th tip, but we don't have to count. Once I wasn't eating bad stuff, once I was only eating good stuff, the signals that my body sent me were very reliable. So I eat a lot of avocados, and, my body one day just said, we need an avocado. And so I was like, okay. So I went out and bought so I went out and got avocados. And, so that's very reliable. Your body can sort of say, we're missing this thing. So go eat that, but you can't really do that unless, because your body will also say, oh, it's been 2 hours since we had a brownie. We need another brownie, and that's not necessarily good information. So I'd say start there.
Yeah, they're great tips. And as we said right at the start, it's a very hot topic right now, ultra processed foods. There was the big documentary just maybe 2 months ago with Chris Van Tulleken and Joe Wicks, the body coach, about ultra processed foods. I know there's just been a very big conference held led by Chris Van Tulleken, and it brought people from all over the globe here to the UK to talk about ultra processed foods. It's on the government agenda. This is more than just, oh, that food's not good for you. A lot of this food is leading to diseases including obesity and many cancers and heart disease, and it is a very real and big threat to our children, to the younger generation, the next generation who haven't even been born yet. So yeah, this is really important. And I loved what you said at the end, with the 3rd tip about start with one thing and the ripple effects, because my framework is a visual of 5 circles for the 5 pillars I have, with mindset in the center and then the other 4 circles around it: the movement, nutrition, sleep and stress. But every one of those circles overlap, so that, yeah, if you start with mindset, it's going to improve sleep, stress, movement and nutrition. And I talk about this, especially when I do the corporate workshops, because it doesn't matter where you start. Once you start to eat better, then you will have more energy and want to move differently, and you will be more resilient and manage stress. You will be able to sleep better, and you will think differently, I guarantee. But if you started somewhere else with sleep, for example, when you are better rested, then your choices around food are different. And we know the impact lack of sleep has on the hormones that impact our hunger and our satiety levels, how full we feel. So yeah, it's all interlinked. And again, your story is very evident of how those ripples impact every element of your health. So thank you so much, Susan. I know we could talk a lot more, but I'd love to bring it to a close now and just let people know where they can connect with you if they are interested in who you are. And please, I always say, like, if you've enjoyed the episode, let the guests know, ask them any questions, like ask Susan what was difficult to navigate, what's our favourite meal, whatever question you might have. Where can they reach out to connect with you?
I would suppose the best way is people can find me on LinkedIn, Susan Mandala, Mandala, PhD. So you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way. I also have my people want to contact me, they can find my website and contact me from there. www.writingworksconsulting.co.uk.
I'll pop, I say, links to those to make it easy for people to just click and go straight to LinkedIn. And maybe you need to do a new PhD in ultra processed foods or something related to that.
Maybe.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
well, thanks.
anyway.
Yeah, thanks so much, Susan.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you. It's been a marvelous experience, and I wish you all the best of luck. I think you do great things. So to you and everybody you work with, health and happiness to all of you.
Oh, thank you. And this is the last episode of the year. So yeah, let's wish everyone a very healthy and nutritious Christmas season.
Absolutely. To all of you. Joy to everybody. Thanks, Nicola.
Thanks, Susan. If this episode has made you pause, maybe even look at your plate or your snack drawer differently, here's what I hope you take away. Food isn't just fuel for your waistline. It's fuel for your hormones, your energy, your clarity of mind, and how you live this next season of life. If you're ready to explore what your body might be asking for beyond calories and calories in and out, I'd love to help you do that. My free midlife reset quiz is built to help you uncover which areas of your health need attention now, whether it's what you eat, how you move, or how you care for yourself. You'll find the link in the show notes. It takes just a few minutes and could be the first step towards feeling more aligned, more energized, and more like yourself again. And if you know another woman who's tired of feeling stuck in the food, body, menopause cycle, please share this episode. Sometimes the simple shift of conversation is the nudge someone needs. Thank you so much for listening and for making your health a priority in this season of life. I'll see you in the next episode in 2026. Take care and have a fantastic Christmas and end of the year.